least I get to see you. It's been a while. So you own and operate LMC Law. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into this industry.
So I grew up in Michigan in Metro Detroit, and I wanted to make a difference in the lives of others. Decided that going to law school would be the best option for me to do that. So I came out here to Vermont in 2007 to go to law school. And as part of that process, I found my way into real estate law. And after a few jobs, I decided to start LMC Law 5 years ago.
Nice. Well, how'd you get into real estate law? Is that like a field of study at school?
So you take a properties course as part of the first year law course, but I didn't get into real estate law until my first job here in Vermont, where it was more transactional side versus doing criminal and family law, and I really it clicked with me. It was problem solving at its best.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk about that for a sec, because law just interests me in general. This isn't really on topic with real estate, but you just mentioned family and criminal and property all in like the same sentence. So like, do you start kind of working on all of them and then pick a field? How does that work?
So it really depends on your course of law study. I never thought I would do real estate law. Was on the trajectory for environmental law, but I found my way back to Vermont with a general practice law firm in Barry Montpelier area, and he had attorneys practicing in all. So I had the ability to learn all the areas of law with his general practice firm, and I really loved real estate law. So getting out into the little Vermont towns, playing with these big historical books, and like really problem solving what's happened to a property and the future of it, and helping people buy and sell them.
That's so cool. And I know what you're talking about with the big books. My grandma was a town clerk in Arlington for years when I was a kid, and she brought me back into the land records and showed me the books. I was like, these are super cool.
They're really heavy too.
Yeah.
And some of the vaults you have to like climb stairs and handle those books. You know, back 40 years is our title searches, which we'll probably talk about later.
Let's go into it now. Yeah. So title search obviously is required on every purchase, regardless of a mortgage. Is that right?
Correct. So you at least have to go back 40 years to determine if there's marketable title. However, in some cases, we have to go beyond 40 years to complete the full title chain. So we're handling indexes, handling the big property books. Quite a few towns are going digital now, where their land records are online, but in most cases, our title searchers are actually out in the properties. So for example, right now, I have a title searcher up in Highgate right now, checking and inspecting the land records for the property's history.
Wow, so is that an employee of yours, or are there like freelance title searchers out there you can take advantage of?
There's both. So here at LMC Law, we have two title searchers, Aaron and Hillary. But you can also freelance. That is, of course, I don't think there's any actual like undergraduate programs you can do here in the state of Vermont, but you can learn from it and potentially be hired by law firms to do it.
Very cool. So you mentioned you're doing the title search to determine marketability. Is that right? What does that mean exactly?
So marketable title, we want to check to see if there's any mortgages on the property, any encumbrances, any liens. What are the easements? What are the rights of way on the property? Are there state and local permits in place? And what does zoning look like? And sometimes we find issues, and those create marketable title issues. So maybe there's an undischarged mortgage because maybe a bank was sold to another bank and they forgot to record the discharge. We would call that a marketable title defect, and we as attorneys need to work with other attorneys who represent the sellers to solve that issue and to get the discharge recorded so that doesn't impact the title work later on.
How often do you find that there are these mortgages out there that even the seller didn't know about?
Quite often. It's really just a paperwork, especially when you get into the bigger banks, the bigger loan servicers, the discharge doesn't get recorded in the actual land records, or it might not be the correct index, so you can't find it on that person's name. So it happens more often than you think.
It's pretty wild. So I always tell my clients, you need an attorney in Vermont. You probably won't talk to them, and that's usually a good thing. If you don't hear from your attorney, that's usually good news. Hearing from them is typically bad news, unless it's just at the closing table and you're signing paperwork. How true is that statement?
That's pretty true. Typically, attorneys are behind the scenes. We'll hear from you at the beginning of the process to get your intake form, your engagement letter, but you probably won't hear from us because we're out in the land records, we're searching your title, we're working with your lender, realtors, if you have them, to try to get you to the closing table. We're also working with the seller's attorney to try to resolve any issues. And yes, we probably don't usually connect with you unless there's a major issue that we can't come to a resolution with or need your assistance with. And then we'll see you at the closing table for your actual closing.
So what can someone expect when they come to you needing an attorney for their purchase? How do you start, and where does it go from there?
Yeah, so whether they've found a home or maybe haven't found a home yet and you want to find your attorney, is reaching out to me by phone or by email. It's nice to have a conversation, but if you don't have any questions, that's okay too. But I'll have a conversation with people, or my staff will. Once you've decided to hire me, we'll have you fill out our engagement letter, which is our intake form. We need to know who you are, what your legal name is, where you live, how you're taking title to the property. That's one of the biggest questions we get, is how to take title to the property.
Talk about that for a second, because that confuses me too.
So there's a few different ways to take title to the property. First is tenants by the entirety. That means that you're married and that upon your passing, your spouse receives the property without going to probate court. Joint tenants with rights of survivorship means that you're connected to the other person, but your share, if you were to pass away, goes 100% to that other person. So you have to be okay with your share going to the other person versus to your estate, which is your heirs at law upon your passing. It affords about the same level of protection as tenants by the entirety, but you're not technically married under the laws of Vermont. Then we have tenants in common, and tenants in common means that you have a certain percent share with whomever you're buying the house with. So if one person is maybe paying more or bringing more the deposit, is they might have a higher share than you. Or you might want 50-50 because you want your share to go to your family upon your passing and your partner's share to go to their family upon passing. So those are some of the main questions we get about that at the beginning of the process. It's always better to ask than, to already sign the deed at the closing and then later on ask why it was done that way.
One question I get a lot from my clients is, do you charge by the hour as a real estate attorney? Pretty much, I'm always telling them no. But
yeah, we charge typically a flat fee unless there is a major title issue, and then usually your attorney will have a conversation with you about what it might take to resolve that issue. But in 99.5% of transactions, it's all flat fee. So from beginning to the end, you're being charged one rate.
How often are there title issues that need a lot of attention?
I would say a couple per year. So it's
pretty rare.
Very rare circumstance where both attorneys can't work with the parties to come to a resolution. Typically before closing, there might be a delay or there might be something that's called an escrow between the parties, but usually everyone is working for the same goal to actually close.
Let's shift gears a little bit. You do more than just real estate.
Mm-hmm.
The other part is estate planning?
Yes.
Unpack that for me.
All right, estate planning. So protecting yourself and your family if something were to happen. So you hear about wills, trusts, living wills, advanced directives, and powers of attorney. So we're trying to meet with families or people without families to determine what happens to their assets, financial assets, and tangible assets if they were to pass away. And what the probate process looks like, so if they were to pass away, and how those different legal documents can help them avoid probate or help them through the probate process.
Nice. So do you often see that people buying a house, it's usually a good idea to set up some sort of will or trust?
Yes. So in most circumstances, my clients will end up purchasing their house, and then I always recommend them to come in for an estate planning session to determine what happens if they pass away, if one spouse or one partner passes before the next, and what they can do to safeguard their property and other financial assets they might have. And usually your property is your biggest asset, especially for first-time home buyers and young professionals.
Now, is it true that there are kind of different tiers of, if you're kind of based on net worth, if it's this, you're going to want this plan. If it's above this threshold, you want this plan. Did I have that right?
Yeah, so it depends on your life stage and really what your assets are. So we try to meet with clients and to determine through a questionnaire what their assets are and what their goals are, to determine, do they just need a will? Do they need a trust? Or maybe do they need some advanced trust planning based on their circumstances?
Is there more to a will than what you see in the movies, where it's just, I want my PlayStation to go to my best friend, I want my dog to go to my sister? Is there more to it than that?
I would say so, yeah. And I think the movies are helpful in that it gets people like thinking about it, and I can help kind of reference, generalized movies, or do you remember seeing this in this movie? And it helps people equate it to their actual circumstances. But there is more to a will than determining your actual PlayStation or dog or where you want your kids or how you want them to be taken care of. That's probably the biggest question for young families.
So break down a closing on a purchase transaction or a refinance. I assume they're pretty similar.
Yep.
What usually happens? Client gets there. What happens?
Yeah, so for a closing, refinance, or purchase, you're usually coming into the office, greeted by me. I usually have a stack of papers. It can be a little bit intimidating, but usually drinking water or coffee while you're doing it. We go through the package, so detailing each page of what it is, trying to answer any questions you might have throughout the process. Some of the most important details being your closing statement, your note, and your mortgage are pretty important documents there. Sometimes I feel like the eyes are glazing over, and I'll check in with clients to make sure they're still listening to me and asking any questions that they might have. Since it is about 50 to 100 pages, depending on the type of closing and the documents we're going through. It usually takes about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the questions everyone has. But leaving the closing with all your questions answered is key. So making sure you ask your attorney any questions you have is really important.
Now, who's present at the closing?
So myself, and then you as clients, if you have realtors, they can be present and lenders can be present. If it's a purchase transaction, we usually have the sellers and their realtor and attorney come in after you've signed your loan document.
What kind of advice would you give a first-time home buyer in today's market from your perspective?
So find your team. So find your lender, find your realtor, find your homeowner's insurance professional. Your team really works with you, and you need to be confident to ask them any questions you have. And if one of them can't give an answer, is asking the next person and is really getting your questions answered. And then people usually ask, well, what questions should I be asking? Well, you have to kind of Google about the process, learn about the process from each of those individuals, and just ask questions, because this is your first time buying a house, probably one of the largest assets you're ever going to purchase. And I would rather you be more careful than less careful.
All right, so that's it for the big serious questions. Now I got a lightning round. I didn't prep you for this. These are just fun though. So we're just gonna fly through it.
Okay.
TV shows or movies?
TV shows.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Tropical or city vacation?
Tropical.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Hamburger or hot dog?
Hamburger.
Best thing to dip fries in?
Ketchup.
Favorite sport to watch?
Football.
Favorite sport to play?
Swimming.
Car or truck?
Car.
Preferred social media.
Facebook.
Can people find you on social media?
Yes.
Where can they find you?
Facebook and Instagram.
All right. And we've got, again, Lisa Campion with LMC Law, PLLC. You can reach her at 802-465-1410 or Lisa at lmcvt.com. And you can check our website out, lmcvt.com. Lisa, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thank you so much.